Hi, this is Kristi from birdmentor.com, where I teach advanced skills to beginning birders. Thanks so much for joining me today. We're going to cover the key features that you want to look at when you see a challenging bird. But before I do that, I want to share with you the answer to last week's quiz. So if you haven't watched the video yet, block your ears. Okay, so that wing that we were looking at last week, that was a wing of an American coot. If you don't know what that is, pull out your field guide, look it up because it's an awesome bird. All right, so can you guys notice the mountains behind me? There's still a little bit of snow back there from a rain we had, I don't know, 2 or 3 days ago. But for me, it's a sign that winter's on its way. It's also the time when a lot of birders love to get out looking for that rare species that they just might see migrating through. So I was out there yesterday morning on a run, and whenever I go on a run, I always take my binoculars with me. And I bought these, it's an awesome pair of Leicas about 12 years ago because I wanted a pair of really high quality optics that were packable and that I could take anywhere with me because I like to travel light. And that's been, I guess what you could say is a blessing and a curse with these because I do take them everywhere. I take them on my runs, and I don't get very far, unfortunately, as you might imagine. So I was out there yesterday, and what I noticed was this little, we call them an LBB or LBJ. It means a little brown bird or a little brown jobby. And why we call it that is because it's a little bird that you might see out in the field that's really hard to identify, right? A lot of those, aren't there? So when I saw this little bird, I ran through the 7 questions to bird identification really quick. And you know the last one, markings, right? So the last question was markings. And what I noticed with the markings on this little bird was that it had the rufous crown, like I mentioned, and it also had a relatively clear breast. There weren't any stripes or anything like that. And so my first guess was a chipping sparrow because they're moving through right now, and they're also really common in this area. But something stood out as kind of different. It was a much bigger bird than a chipping sparrow. It just looked really long and tall. And now I want you to pay attention when that happens to you. When you get that little voice in your head that says something's off, something's not quite right. Because there's often a really good reason for that. So when I hear that little voice in my head, I make sure I pay extra close attention. And so that's exactly what I did. And so what do you do? What do you do when you see a bird and you think, gosh, that's not my, the automatic assumption. It may not be right. So what do you look at? What do you focus on if you might just have a split second to see that bird? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. So what I like to do is look for the prominent family markers. And what that is these markings on the bird that are similar throughout the family, but also slightly different. So for a sparrow, what those markers are, for me, are the head region. So I'm going to look at the head region and the breast, okay? Because in the sparrow, quite often, what you'll see are many different kinds of patterns on the head. So there might be different crown markings, there might be an eyebrow, an eye line, there might be a different color on the malar region right here. It's kind of like the chops if you were to have a mustache. It's the chops area of the bird. And then I look at the breast. And so just keeping it really basic and simple, ask yourself, is this sparrow stripy on its breast, or is it relatively clear and doesn't have very many markings at all? So that's it. So sparrows, you look at the head and the breast. Just if you have a moment. If you've got longer, of course, you're going to look for more details. Hi. So what I noticed with that that little bird that I saw, now taking all that into consideration with our sparrows, is that it had the rufous here, a cream stripe there, then rufous, and it had this like rufous stripe behind its eye, an eye stripe, and then its breast was really clear. The other piece that stood out to me was that it had a really orangish, like pinkish orangish bill. which is different from the chipping sparrow. The other thing that's different is that given the time of year we've got right now, most of the chipping sparrows don't have that really rufous crown that they do during the breeding season. So this bird still had a relatively reddish or rufous crown. So putting all that together, I was able to figure out that it actually was a first winter white-crowned sparrow. So pull out your field guide, take a look at both of them, and see what you think. All right, well, thanks so much for joining me today. What I'd like you guys to do right now is go ahead and I want you to choose just one species. Don't go wild here. Just take one species and look at what's similar and what's different in the birds that you're seeing, and then decide for yourself what are the family markers that might be that you might use for that family, and then tell me in the comments below. Let me know what you decided. Thanks so much for joining me today.